The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday, August 17th. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you also hope you enjoyed my show with Nikos yesterday. We talked about Mao Zedong. It was spooky. It was spooky in the sense of how, you know, we're talking about a lot of some of the most evil regimes in the history of mankind. We did Cambodia. We talked about Mao. There's always the Soviet Union kind of in the background, Stalin, and it is, and of course the Nazis, and it is. It's scary how they got away with all that, and how they how people participated in it. And again, one of the things that really differentiate the Cultural Revolution in particular is the participation of just regular students who end up killing about 1.5 to 2 million people. It really is stunning how normal people can become monsters, and how prevalent that is in human history, and how often it happens. And you really need to watch. You really need to watch the cultural trends and see what is going on, because all those people out there who seem normal and nice and friendly and everything, in the right circumstances, with the right set of ideas, and I think the ideas are already here, in the right circumstances, with the right kind of crazy leadership, they can become monsters. We saw that in Germany under the Nazis. You definitely saw that in the Soviet Union, Eastern Germany, the rest of the Soviet bloc, and then, of course, in Cambodia and China. You know, we haven't even talked about Indonesia and all these other places where, we talked about Franco and how barbaric people became during the Civil War. So yes, this should really cause people to reflect and think about the dangers of just letting bad ideologies take over and become dominant in a culture, and just sit on the sideline assuming, which I think the Jews of Germany assumed, oh yeah, but the people are basically good, so nothing really bad is going to happen. Yeah. Right. That has not worked out in history, not worked out well at all. Talking about bad ideas, there's a lot of talk right now, a lot of energy right now, a lot of people writing about woke 1.0. Woke 1.0 suggests a woke 2.0. So we'll get to the woke 2.0 in a minute, but let's try to resurrect where this woke 1.0 has come from, and why suddenly all this interest in resurrecting woke. I mean, there's a general, there seems to be a general view that woke, as we knew it in the late 20-teens and early 2020s, kind of peaked somewhere in the post-COVID era, maybe in 2022. The number of cancellations, the sheer vitriol around woke, the intersectionality, the identity politics, all of that kind of peaked, and certainly with Trump's election has been in decline as DEI becomes less popular, and as government backs away from DEI and corporations seem to back away from DEI, and that a lot of these issues and a lot of the kind of the statements were made during the heyday of 2020 riots, defunding the police and things like that. All of that kind of peaked back then, and things are calmer now and more rational now and saner now. At least that is the, I think, the perspective most people have, and there's a sense in which that is true. Woke 1.0, that phase of the woke era, I don't think it's the last phase, but that phase of the woke era seems to be over, and that particular framing of issues, while it is still dominating academia, so one wonders how that'll manifest itself, it's still dominating academia. That particular phrasing might be over, and the question is what replaces it, because again, we'll see this, there's been no reckoning on the left around woke 1.0, around woke, I'm using their terminology now 1.0, but around woke. There's been no real intellectual, thought and analysis, and there has been on the right, and there has been by some on the center left, but not that many. And there just hasn't been kind of all the professors who arguably created woke, all the professors who all those ideas of postmodernism that manifest in kind of post-colonialism and intersectionality and the identity politics and everything else that expressed themselves in DEI and ESG and all these other things. None of those professors have gone anywhere. None of those professors have gone anywhere. They're all there. The material is still being taught. The ideas are still alive and well. You could argue that their expression has changed. We'll get to that when we talk about woke 2.0. The manifestation of those ideas has changed. But, so the trans movement is not as big, and the trans issue is not as dominating, and a lot of people on the left have walked away a little bit from the trans issue because they saw it is a losing issue. But there's been no rethinking, there's been no challenge to the fundamental ideas, the fundamental philosophical, if you want to call them philosophical ideas of that led to woke. So that set of agenda items might have been put to the side, but all those ideas, again, the post-colonialism, the intersectionality, the real altruistic, driven by altruism, and the identity politics, all of that is going to have to be channeled into new ideas. And we'll talk about what those might be in a minute. So how did we get suddenly everybody talking about woke 1.0? Well, AOC, the congresswoman who has, we are told, ambitions to run for the Democratic nomination for president in 2028, she was on ABC this week, this last Sunday, and she was asked about some of the positions that the Democratic Socialists took around 2020. So not about the Democratic Socialist positions right now, some of which are completely insane, but around the Democratic Socialist positions in 2020. Primarily, I think, defund the police and do away with prisons and things like that. And her response was, look, those are products of the time. And she made the statement of, quote, woke one was crazy. And she left. And then she quoted a politician friend and said, quote, and I think that's what's important, is that we have to assess what a candidate is saying now, unquote. So don't look back at what they said in 2020. Yeah, things were crazy in 2020. People said crazy stuff in 2020. We shouldn't evaluate people today on what they said back then, because it was crazy. I mean, life was crazy. The environment was crazy. The influences were crazy. So evaluate them now. She went on to say, it was the pandemic. There was a lot of there was a lot of stress. Those discussions were all fruitful, but, quote, the rhetoric in that time is not rhetoric that we would use today. Why not? Because that rhetoric got Donald Trump elected. she didn't say that. I'm saying that, but that's the reason, right? Do they not believe it anymore? No, many of them still believe it. To the extent that they believed it back then, right? A lot of them believed it back then. Why? A lot of them believed it back then because that was the thing to believe. That was the cool thing to believe. That's what you retweeted. That's what got you in to the right kind of leftist circles, is you holding these views. Not holding these views, you an outsider on the left. And in those days, retweeting and restating and re-arguing without thinking, completely tribal mentality of the left, of around defunding the police, around violence, the systemic racism. Remember systemic racism? American society was filled, saturated with systemic racism, and everything else that the woke agenda dictated back then. There's a number of high-profile candidates who are trying to wipe their 2020 record clean, and it's hard to do because it's all public stuff. Nobody's going to let it go. Harris tried to do it during a 2020 presidential campaign. Harris endorsed taxpayer-funded medically necessary gender transition surgeries for federal inmates, decriminalizing border crossing and banning plastic straws, among other things. 4 years later, when she ran for president, she tried to completely reposition herself as center-left and walk away from from some of those ideas. And you're seeing it now with a lot of the candidates. And of course, Francisca Hong, who was the Wisconsin gubernatorial candidate, a Democratic socialist who once called for the elimination of the police, as well as the elimination of prisons, even proposed doing away with Thanksgiving because it's a horrible, racist holiday. She tried to walk away from those, and she probably lost the primary to a more centrist Democrat as a consequence of not being able to fully walk away from that. As a consequence of people remembering all of that and not wanting to walk away from it. So woke one was crazy is a superficial laugh off the problem and ignore the fundamental issues, ignore the underlying ideology and philosophy that you'd expect from AOC. I mean, laugh it off, not take it seriously, and move on, right? And of course, she's going to want to do that, AOC. If she wants to run for president, she's not going to run as woke 1.0 candidate. And if she doesn't run for president, she'll almost certainly run for Senate. And again, she is going to have to moderate, and kind of walk away from kind of the position she and so many of her colleagues took back in 2020. Will voters accept that? Will voters just accept, yeah, it was crazy back then. You're forgiven. Anything you said back then, that doesn't count. We won't count it against you. Just whatever you want to say. That's fine. Anyway, there's a real reckoning going on. A lot of people are writing about woke 1.0 and what happened and what it is and what's happening today and is woke really gone? Has woke morphed? What is woke today? But I mean, what characterized woke was the sense of among the tribe, the need to reaffirm whatever stupid idea was being promoted at the time. Matt Iglesias, who is kind of center left, but is way, way, way too accommodating of the nutty left. He writes, those who actually said nutty things have suffered for it to an extent, which is actually why there's now this effort to slick away from them. But those who ended up on the wrong side of woke one fads also suffered. The winners were those who ducked the storm. Budget experts who knew it wasn't true that cities spend more money on police than schools, but didn't say so, and emerged with their reputations unscathed. That incentive structure, he continues, to avoid being the well, actually guy is still very much with us and means that any kind of discourse could go widely off the rails. And unfortunately, while we are now deeply into an anti-woke backlash on the right, the backlash isn't taking the form of resisting the poor epistemic practices of the woke left. It's resisting the value of caring about, he says, the weak and unfortunate, while replicating the same toxic dynamics. And I think he's right. We've replaced woke 1.0 with woke 2.1 and woke 2.2. Woke 2.1 is the complete and utter tribalism we're seeing on the right. The exact same kind of epistemic mentality. Epistemic means epistemology, from epistemology. Not bothering to figure out if something's true or not. Not looking into the facts. Not evaluating. But just following the dogma. Following the tribe. And, while there are several tribes now, on the right. They each have their tribal leaders and they each have their tribal dogma. And the tribal dogma gets repeat, recycle, repeat, recycle. The idea of the phenomena of wokeness, which involved not bothering with reality, not bothering with thinking, but buying into whatever it was the leaders of the movement dictated, whatever they said, not bothering with statistics or facts or evidence or anything like that. That, unfortunately, that postmodern, and I think it's very postmodern, that idea that truth is whatever, that truth is, let's not take truth very seriously. That is very much alive and well, and it's on the right and it's on the left. And, nothing, in that sense, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed in terms of the fundamental ideas the left still holds. And if anything, the epistemology of the tribalism of that woke mentality has now spread to many, many other parts of our culture and many, many other parts of our nation. And now it unites both left and right. There's an essay in the Atlantic about woke 1.0 and what is and it makes the case that at the end of the day, the fundamental ideas haven't changed. So now it's a question of what becomes the new dogma. And if you look at the right, well, the new dogma is around Trump, anything he does, right? He can't do any wrong. That is weakening as people are becoming more and more and more frustrated with Trump. It has to do with ICE and not even thinking about what ICE is actually doing, what the facts actually show. And you still you see people defending ICE on the basis of law enforcement and protecting us from criminals, when what ICE is doing has nothing to do with that and never had anything to do with that. You still get on the right, people retweeting, reinforcing Trump's genius, Trump's 3D chess in all kinds of aspects of what the administration is doing. There's less of that on tariffs recently, but it's the same phenomena. And then on the left, what you're getting now is really this democratic socialist. What you're getting now is woke 2.0 is less about racial politics. It's less about the oppressor and the oppressed, although that manifests itself particularly in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and in the just unthinking attitude towards Israel and towards the Palestinians, just unthinking. That has become dogma in woke 2.0 for the left, and to some extent for the right. But then now you've got a morphing from, racial politics to class politics. So now it's just a given that we need a wealth tax. It's just a given that the rich are these horrible people that need to be suppressed and taxed and reined in. It's just a given that inequality is exploded and is destroying this country. It's just a given that young people are struggling and it's just horrible and it's just difficult, and everything about America is horrible and destructive, and what we need is radical change through some kind of form of socialism, even if we don't use that term socialism. So what you're seeing on the left is a reorientation around an older kind of Marxism and a hatred of Israel. Those are the two big issues right now on the left: hatred of Israel, alignment with the Palestinian cause, alignment with Hamas, and a resurrection of Marxist ideology. And as given that the Democratic Party today is dominated by the college educated, again, nothing in their education has changed. So oppressor oppressed applied to Israel Palestinian since October 7th. That has been the main issue that has animated the left. And then beyond that, it's cost of living. Young people are really struggling, and what we need in order to solve this problem are things that economists have debunked over and over and over again, and it doesn't matter one iota. Price controls, like rent control. And by the way, price controls are very popular across the political spectrum in America right now. I mean, the sheer ignorance, central planning, industrial policy, bringing the jobs back somehow. So now, maybe defund the police is not high on the agenda, although if you read the Democratic Socialists of America platform, it makes whatever was said in 2020 by the radical left, it makes it look like child's play, right? I mean, they don't just want to abolish the police and abolish prisons. They want to abolish the Senate, and they want to get rid of the Supreme Court. And, they basically want to get rid of, they want a completely different form of government. They want to get rid of the Constitution. They are far more, extreme and anti-American and anti the American system, and then even woke was. And they're running candidates, and those candidates are, for the most part, fairly successful. And they're really all over the place. Now, I don't think they can win. I've said this many times. I think ultimately, the more Democratic Social of America you become, the more you will fail, the more voters will reject you. I worry more about like this Al-Sayad guy in Michigan. Like, one of the things I just read about Al-Sayad is he is claiming he's a capitalist. He's claiming he is. This is the leftist who just won the Democratic primary in Michigan, and he's claiming that the problem is that we need to resurrect. We need to save capitalism, and we need more competition. We need. And to do that, you need more state involvement, and we need to break up the AI monopolies by having the state own them. But that's capitalism to him. So he's of the Elizabeth Warren school, who's not a democratic socialist. Elizabeth Warren has always claimed that she's a strong believer in capitalism. She wants to save capitalism. She wants to protect capitalism. And you need strong state involvement, strong regulations, strong, central planning in order to save capitalism from itself. Those people scare me more than the democratic socialists of America, who I think don't have a chance. But it's going to be interesting, given the tribal mentality that we're seeing both on left and right. It's going to be really interesting to see how, how the features of woke, tribalism, in groups, out groups, based on, tribal belonging and tribal acceptance. Again, we don't need these woke terminologies. I think tribalism captures it. Woke captures a certain mentality. I think this idea that there's a woke 2.0 is probably ultimately going to be pretty silly. And given that the epistemic issues across the entire political spectrum, I'm not sure how it's going to be 2.1 for the right and 2.2 for the left, or how exactly you're going to talk about what it actually means, right? Now, right now the left is ascendant, particularly among young people. Trump is unbelievably unpopular. Republicans unbelievably unpopular, as they should be. And the left seems to be strong as a consequence. And the people who are most vocal on the left, the people who are succeeding on the left, are the most extreme people, which again you'd expect because they're the most consistent people. And we'll see whether people get canceled and how they get canceled. I'm sure people are still getting canceled, and Twitter mobs are still out there trying to discipline people around stuff. It's not the kind of hysteria that we saw in 2020, but it's still out there. So we'll see how all this evolves. I don't really expect the particulars of the woke phenomena to come back, but the basic ideas, again, the tribalism, the unthinking, the not caring about truth, but caring about which group you belong to, that is with us, and it's going to be with us for a long time. And then together with that, this idea of, I don't know if you're canceling, but I've said many times, I'm all for canceling. I'm not against canceling in and of itself. It's canceling for unjust reasons, canceling for trivialities, canceling because you didn't quite toe the exact tribal line that you were supposed to. That is what seemed so irrational and stupid at the time. And that might come back. That might come back. Wouldn't be surprised. All right. So again, the new thing is anti-rich, anti-Israel. That's the big stuff. That's where the ideas are concentrated on. It's just the same play of oppressed oppressor, manifest differently. Instead of racially, although that will probably come back as well, instead of focusing on the racial aspect of it, it's focused on socioeconomic, on economic, sorry, not social, on economic, which is, again, a return to kind of our Marxist roots, and focused on very ancient roots, which is, Jews successful, Jews running the world, Israel, Palestinians oppressed, Jews rich and successful. And that's just the post-colonialism stuff, and again, completely embraced by the right, which is interesting. By the Tucker Carlson right, completely embraced. All right, connected to all this is the rise and fall of Jason Arday. Jason Arday, who was the youngest Black to become a professor at Cambridge University, the youngest Black professor in Cambridge University's history. committed suicide over the weekend, brought the story even more full force to the center of things. So let's delve into the Jason Arday story and then some of the responses to it. So Jason Arday again was hailed as this amazing, young rising star in academia. He was now again a lot of his. He was at Cambridge in the sociology department, got a professorship in the sociology department, and was again praised. And on Wednesday, last week before last, he, following 2 weeks of accusations about plagiarism, but also accusations questioning his academic work, plagiarism in his dissertation, but also questions about his whole backstory, his whole biography. He resigned from Cambridge, and then, as I said, over the weekend, it appears committed suicide. So let's go into some of this biography, right? Supposedly, again, it's hard to tell what's fact and what's fiction when it comes to Jason Arday's biography. He was diagnosed supposedly as autistic as a child. He says he was nonverbal until he was 11 and only learned to read and write at age 18. Now, a lot of people have questioned that account. Schoolmates of his who were in school with him when he was under 11, and then later on challenged that account. But that is the story that he has been telling for a long time. That's a story that's been embraced, and this is part of the rags to riches, not rags to riches, but a kid who cannot read, cannot write at 18 becomes youngest Black professor in Cambridge's history in less than 20 years. So at age 38, he becomes the professor. So let's run down some. I don't think this is exhaustive. Some of the questions that are being asked about him, and note that I'm going to read you from some of this. This is from the Guardian, and the Guardian is it's like the leftist newspaper in the United Kingdom. So this is the Guardian acknowledging these issues with this guy. So from a leftist newspaper, assume this is the moderate version, right? So let's talk about plagiarism. This is from the newspaper. Arday first faced allegations that he plagiarized parts of his PhD thesis and other academic research late last year. He has rejected the claims. The Telegraph reported that analysis has found more than 100 passages in his PhD was similar to another thesis by Paula Myers, a student at Brunel University of London, published 6 years previously. Now, supposedly there have been other investigations into this. For example, by Liverpool, John Moores University, which actually gave him his PhD in 2015, and they upheld that this was all honest and reasonable error. But these allegations have all resurfaced, and now it looks a lot worse than that. And people, of course, are asking, how much of this looking the other way, allowing this to go forward, had to do with the fact that he was Black, and the fact that he had this amazing backstory to justify it. So, lots of people have been accused of plagiarism over the last few years. Presidents of universities have resigned over plagiarism accusations. So, if there really are signs of plagiarism, it's reasonable for the university to ask questions, and it's reasonable to expect that caused his resignation, from Cambridge. Now, he also faced claims that some of his more recent published work is flawed from the article. The Times published analysis on Wednesday that found some of his research contained, quote, impossible evidence that was littered with inconsistencies. 2 corrections had previously been made to papers he released in 2018 and 2020. Again, he's at Cambridge. He's at a prestigious university. How does he get away with this? Why is this all coming out now? Why for years has he gotten away with plagiarism and then, impossible evidence, if you will? Now, he's also claimed a number of prestigious academic positions that have been questioned. Again, to quote the article, the website for the Jesus College, where Arday was a fellow, stated that he had been a visiting professor at Ohio State University in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and at the University of Glasgow in the School of Education. Both universities denied this. When he was granted a professorship at Cambridge, did nobody do any due diligence about his academic credentials? His biography also stated that Arday was still a, quote, honorable professor at Durham University in the Department of Sociology, where he had previously worked. The university told the Daily Mail that he no longer held that role at the institution. Arday has also claimed to have completed a master's in psychodynamic practices at Birkbeck University of London, and afterwards became a fully qualified counselor, which gave him a rich, quote, a rich understanding of mental health, is quoting him. However, when the Guardian contacted Birkbeck, the university said it had not been able to find records of a student named Jason Arday having studied there. Arday is claimed to have published a book called Being Young, Black, and Male, Challenging the Dominant Discourse, with Palgrave Macmillan. The publisher subsequently confirmed that it took a proposal from Arday, but the book was never published. So these are pretty bold-faced lies. This is not trivial stuff. Plagiarism, fake data, it sounds like, or impossible evidence, however you want to call that, and then just lying on your resume. People get fired all the time for this kind of stuff, and a lot less. So again, why was he allowed to stick around? All right, what is going on here? I don't know what semi-logistics' issue is, but let me just say, if you're going to dominate the chat, I'm going to block you. So if you want to stay on the chat, fine, and post once in a while, fine. But if you're going to, just constantly post on there, I'm just going to block you because it's just disruptive and non-productive. So you make the call. He also has these, crazy claims that he's made over the years about his sports achievements. So, for example, he claims to have run 30 marathons in 35 days to raise money for charity. In 2012, when Arday met the tennis star Andy Murray, he told him he had an epileptic seizure during one of the marathons and fractured his leg. Despite that incident, Arday claimed to have run 9 more marathons to complete the challenge. 30 marathons in 35 days. That's crazy. He also claimed at public events to have run 600 miles in 6 days, an achievement that would make him one of the world's most gifted endurance runners. The men's record is 650 miles in 6 days. Now, he ultimately said because of cumulative wear and tear of training from his previous running challenges, he had to put rest days in between the running days just to finish the 600-mile challenge, which he actually completed over a 12-day period. but nobody even knows if that's true. He claimed in 2024 to have played for Crystal Palace, the football team, as an under 18. He told Talking Matters podcast he spent a handful of years at the club before going on to a semi-professional football, to playing semi-professional football for 12 years. Again, Crystal Palace can't confirm it. They don't have records going back to the 90s and early 2000s, but nobody remembers him. His charitable works, as well as his endurance running claims, Arday has said he has completed other charitable work over the past 2 decades. He claimed in media interviews to raise £5 million for charities over a 20-year period. As his critics online have pointed out, £5 million raised for charity would be a staggering amount for someone who is not famous. In 2012, Arday said he hoped to raise £250,000 by the time he was 50. When asked if the £5 million figure was accurate, Arday told The Guardian the money had been raised with the help of many fundraising collectives over a 2-decade period. He also said he is part of a 100-person syndicate. When asked to identify other people who took part in these efforts, Arday said he had signed an NDA preventing him from disclosing that information. Convenient. Arday claimed to have visited South America and West Africa to install water points with the charity Water Aid. The charity said, quote, out of respect for the people we work with, it never sent its volunteers abroad. Water Aid added that it doesn't encourage or facilitate self-funded visits either. In Arday's memoir, he mentions going to Brazil to install a well, but does not mention Water Aid. So, this guy fabricated his history, fabricated his research, lies constantly, and plagiarized. He also claimed to be harassed and intimidated. There is some, suggestion that some of it's true, but for example, he's claimed to be confronted in the faculty building on 2 separate occasions by a masked man who threatened to harm him if he did not resign and evade detection both times. On both occasions, they said the intruder had produced a knife and threatened him with it, but the intruder is not picked up on CCTV on either occasions. No one in the faculty reported seeing anyone suspicious. They did not report either intrusion at the time. He did not inform his colleagues that a masked man with a knife was in the faculty building. So he also lied about these kind of harassments and threats, and an article goes on with other examples and so on. So here's a guy who, lied, cheated his way through life. And ultimately, when confronted with all of that, was forced to resign. And, I guess ultimately, once he resigned, all this came out. The Guardian published this after he resigned. All this came out once he resigned, and, everybody kind of attacked him, and he couldn't handle all that, and he committed suicide over the weekend. Now, the response from the left, is quite striking, of course. This is what Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, wrote. Jason Arday was the victim of pernicious public shaming that other people in his position simply wouldn't have faced. Now, that's just blatantly untrue. People are constantly caught with plagiarism, constantly, kicked out of academia for having views that are not acceptable. I mean, what was the whole woke phenomenon? For years, in England in particular, if you challenge the leftist dogma over trans issues, it was hard to, you couldn't survive. I mean, Kathleen Stark was bullied out of the University of Sussex over her views on gender. So Tim Hunt was subject to the most brutal kind of online backlash after making one perhaps off-color joke about women, prompting him to resign his position as honorary professor at the University College London. I mean, think about Larry Summers, who had to resign from Harvard for making basically a comment about women. And this is not a whole history of plagiarism, fake academics. I mean, what was it? The president of one of the universities had to resign over plagiarism attacks. Was it the president or the dean at Stanford who had to resign over fake data in his scientific research? There's a long tradition of this. There's no pernicious public shaming. Given the extent of his lying, what appears to be the extent of his lying and the extent of his fakery, it seems like the public shaming was completely justified. A left-wing member of parliament, Zahara Sultana, said if Jason Arday were a white middle-class academic, he would not have been hounded by the British press in the way he was. Yeah, but part of this is the fact that he was hailed as the next coming because he was a Black professor. I mean, if you make race into a big deal, then don't be surprised when it comes back to bite you. He was hailed as the youngest Black professor at Cambridge, and then hailed as this superstar Black academic. Black always was part of it. So, surprise, surprise, when he fails, people say, wait a minute, you hailed him for all this stuff. They piled on to him. I mean, probably the craziest is an article by Ibram X. Kendi. You remember Kendi? Kendi, the anti-racist racist? He said, the death of Jason Arday hit so close to home that I had no words yesterday, but I woke up with words. To be a prominent anti-racist Black scholar is to know you are a target, almost totally surrounded by resentments. You know that at any point, the attacks can come like a lynch mob. And if you die from all the attacks, the media still calls the attacks on you accusations to wash their hands of the blood. Your lynchers announce your death as if they had no role in your lynching. And the title of his new piece in the Emancipator, it's called "The Media Lynched Jason Arday." This is what John McCorther wrote about this. No engagement with the errant lies, the massive plagiarism, the airy public addresses. Kendi thinks all that is okay if you're Black and have dreadlocks, and that Arday was still a legitimate academic seized upon because of his color. Kendi thinks Blackness exempts one from amassing data, drawing connections, and presenting novel insights. You're the real thing in just showing racism exists. Despite that, this is a rote exercise. We don't have to be actually smart, and in fact, shouldn't be too Western. We are authentic in eternally contesting. That take is deep if you have dreadlocks and change your name to Kendi. Note that he seems not to have worked out at the Atlantic and publishes this soapbox performance art somewhere you're a little surprised the public intellectual of his stature would choose. I wish Arday was still alive. But this take on Arday is lynched is performance art. American academia should hesitate to embrace it. I mean, that's John Werther can write. He's a beautiful writer. And yes, I mean, this is from Richard Hanania, which I think is true. Arday is a symptom, and him getting away with his lies as long as he did indicates that Cambridge is in even worse shape than most of us thought. If universities don't want the scrutiny that comes from being high prestige institutions, they can no longer continue with the assumption that the rest of us should be deferring to them on intellectual, moral, or political issues. You're the ones who told us that being, quote, the youngest Black professor in the history of Cambridge was newsworthy. When Arday was being championed as an inspirational figure, being interviewed on major news programs and getting 1.4 million advance on his book, according to Arday himself, for what that's worth. None of the critics of the recent coverage of his fall was saying that society was paying too much attention to what was going on in academia. Now that it has become clear that Cambridge prioritized the ideology of diversity over academic rigor or the concern for truth, the rest of us are supposed to feel guilty for taking what Arday's boosters within and outside the university said at face value. As his last act, Arday temporarily made it more difficult to have a real discussion about what has gone wrong in Western intellectual life. That's is committing suicide. But the degree to which Cambridge failed and the vividness of his lies, will hopefully help this story serve a purpose. Thanks in part to the uselessness of the so-called scholarship he produced, in death, Arday might make a contribution to the advancement of human knowledge after all. This is a sad story of the consequence of woke. It's a sad story of the consequence of what we experienced in the late, 2000s and into the 2020s. And I'm sure still experiencing, out there. This is again from McWhorter, from a different article he wrote at the Free Press. There's an old joke about white people's reception of Black colleagues. After the Black professor finishes giving a talk, someone in the audience asks if he can tap dance too. Not a very funny joke. Arday's elevation at Cambridge was founded in racism, no less overt. So what we call reverse racism, but it's racism. So racism is racism. We treat people based on their race, for good or for ill. It is evil. It is wrong. And there are horrific consequences to that. And it's hard to tell what's true and what's not true about Arday's life, because, it could very well be that at some point he stopped knowing what was true and was not true about the stories he was telling everybody about his own life. That often happens with liars. They can't tell the difference anymore. But this is a symptom of, this is not the symptom, this is the consequence of the kind of racial ideology that dominated and I think is still dominant in our universities. This is the consequence of kind of DEI on steroids. This is the consequence of paying attention, elevated attention, exaggerated attention to a person's race and giving them credit for the color of their skin rather than the quality of their mind. And in the university context, the quality of their research, the quality of their teaching, the quality of their ideas. And in this sense, I don't know what the university is going to learn from this Arday experience. Again, woke 1.0 seems to have peaked a few years ago, but what has changed in the underlying ideas? Almost nothing. How are they going to manifest themselves? We will see. We will see. How much of it is going to be race versus other things? It's hard to tell. All right, let us shift gears to more newsy stuff. Let's talk about, I think Trump I haven't talked about Trump in a while. I think now almost, not 2 years, but what, a year and 8 months or something like that, a year and 8 months into Trump's presidency, you really now we get the scale of the extent to which he is a failed president, to which his policies have failed through and through. The economy is okay, but people feel, and there's some justification for the feeling, that their standard of living is declining, cost of living is going up, wages, at least in the last few months, have been below the rise in cost of living. You're also seeing a lot of angst. Right now, given the massive economic changes that we should expect as a result of AI, we need a real leader. We need somebody who can calm people down, who can actually articulate a future, can posit what AI makes possible, and get people excited about it. We don't have such a leader. And we have a leader that basically is not dealing with the issue. It's just ignoring it. And it's true, by not regulating, that's a positive, right? I'll give him the positive. But on the other hand, not communicating, leaving people in angst out there, both on the right and on the left. The majority of Americans today are suspicious and resentful of AI. His tariff policy is a complete fiasco and a disaster. I mean, given the investment going on right now in AI, given the growth in technology, America should be experiencing an economic boom. We should be thriving. We're not, to a large extent, because of Fed policy around money, and because of the Trump administration's insane tariffs. And it's not the tariff itself that is as damaging. It's everything surrounding the tariff, the uncertainty, and the fear that it has created among people around the cost of living, and rising prices. So policies that are not helping America domestically, and we're not seeing a real focus on, other than he cut taxes, we're not seeing any focus on significant ways in which we'll become freer. Now, it's true in energy, maybe in transportation, a few places, there's some deregulation going on and some minor improvements happening. But there's no focus on that. This administration is not focused on liberating the US economy. And just a little bit of that. And if you got rid of these stupid tariffs, again, this economy could boom. There's also gas prices going up because he can't finish a war. But maybe the area in which Trump has been the biggest failure by far. Grebler says you're incorrect about tariffs. No, I'm not. Tariffs are unmitigated disaster. And I've said this, I've been talking about tariffs for 10 years. I know economics, and I've got long shows articulating the case against tariffs, why all the arguments, every single argument you can make about tariffs, a positive argument about tariffs, is wrong. It's wrong practically, it's wrong theoretically, it's wrong morally. I've done a whole course for the Peterson Academy on globalization and trade, and I articulate all the reasons why tariffs are, disastrous. They're not single-handedly good, because trade is not big enough relative to the size of the U.S. economy to tank the U.S. economy, but they're definitely slowing things down, raising prices, and just raising taxes. A tariff is a tax. A tariff is a tax on all of us. It's a sales tax on certain types of goods. And the one thing we know the tariffs have not done is they've not brought any manufacturing back to the United States, because manufacturing jobs have actually declined. So China, Cuba, Venezuela, all due in part to tariffs. No, none of that is true, and nothing has happened with China. China is more emboldened, and the Chinese economy is struggling because of the Chinese economy and decisions China made about the Chinese economy. It has nothing to do with our tariffs. Venezuela has nothing to do with our tariffs. Cuba is an embargo. It's not tariffs. Cuba is a completely different story. And the same with Venezuela. There were no tariffs in Venezuela. Venezuela was an embargo. So no, I mean, people who talk about tariffs, people who try to justify Trump's tariff, generally don't know what tariffs are. They don't know how they're used. They don't know much about international economics or the international scene. No tariffs on Venezuela. Venezuela was an embargo. There was no tariffs on Cuba. It was an embargo. And tariffs have done nothing to China. Nothing. Indeed, the US government, Trump's administration admits that we're still importing the same Chinese goods as we used to. We're just doing it now through third countries. And now they want to create a whole system that tracks the goods and penalizes any country that is caught siphoning Chinese goods into the United States because it hasn't really done anything. China is exporting more stuff today than ever in its history. Chinese problems have to do with Chinese economic policies. It's not an issue of disagreeing, Glauber. It's an issue of facts. It's an issue of reality. This is the issue of epistemic knowledge that I talked about earlier. The question is there truth and are there facts? Your opinion doesn't matter. Your opinion is irrelevant. And it's not that I'm just claiming arbitrarily that I know stuff. It's that I've got a 10-year, 15-year record, 10-year record of presenting facts on tariffs, on trade, lecturing on trade, teaching classes on trade, going through trade economics, and 10 years. I'm not saying trust me, but I'm saying you should be wary of challenging me on tariffs. And if you hear me say this stuff on tariffs, your response should be go research a little bit about who I am, and then maybe go research a little bit about what you actually know and what you actually don't know. Anyway, the area in which Donald Trump has been worst has been a complete and utter, unequivocal failure. Giller is doing what they always do. Oh, trade is not the only good. So I failed to convince you on that issue. Let me jump to another issue to try to do. On every issue, tariffs are evil and bad and wrong and ineffectual and don't achieve even the stated targets that they set out to achieve. And again, I cover all the non-trade issues that relate to tariffs. You're absolutely right. Trade is not the only good. Trade is a huge good, but it's not the only good. And yet, tariffs fail to achieve any good. They achieve lots of bad. All right, back to foreign policy. This is the area where Trump has failed and is failing right now on a historical scale. I can't think of a president who has made more blunders. And it's wrong to call them blunders because this is what he really believes has damaged the United States more from a foreign policy perspective than Donald Trump has. He started a war which should have been easy to win, and he didn't win it. He actually lost it to a far inferior force that has no real weapons of consequence, is a poor nation, and yet the United States cannot, because of the leadership of Donald Trump, cannot defeat this nation, Iran. He started a war with no strategy. No strategy how to keep the homos straits open. No strategy on what regime change looked like. No strategy on what getting rid of their nuclear program looked like. No strategy around actually destroying their missile capability. None. He then signs a memorandum of understanding with the regime that has never lived up to any signed agreement ever and has no reason to. And all at the same time threatening them with annihilation and blowing them up and all of this and never doing it. Threatening, threatening, threatening. Red lines, red lines, red lines. They cross the red lines constantly and he does nothing. Now it turns out there's a big Wall Street Journal article, which I don't know why it surprises anybody. Iran's secret plan to escalate the war. Intercepted communications and other intelligence suggest a strategic shift by hardline leaders to raise the cost for the U.S. and its regional allies. The story basically says, let me see if this was the The story basically says when the Iranians signed the memorandum of understanding, and the Trump administration got all engaged with let's go and negotiate with them, the Iranians basically hunkered down and sat down and planned out how they will continue the war in phase 2. They rearmed. They opened up the block tunnels to get at the missiles. They bought equipment from the Chinese and the Russians. They reassembled the factories that had been destroyed to make ballistic missiles and drones. Everything that you'd expect a regime like the Iranians to do, and the Wall Street Journal and everybody else is surprised. Oh my God. Here's the opening paragraph. After President Trump signed a memorandum of understanding with Iran in mid-June, administration officials fanned out to build support for an agreement they hope could reopen the Strait of Hormuz and start winding down the war. The stupid naivete of the Trump administration's foreign policy. Naivete is not naivete, blindness, evasion. I continue from the article. Iran's hardline leaders huddled in Tehran and came up with a different plan. According to Iranian and Arab officials, in their view, the pact was likely just an attempt by the United States and Israel to take pressure off the global economy and buy time for a bigger attack down the road. Instead of putting faith in talks, they took the past 2 months to prepare for a bigger fight. The efforts include giving the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps more control of the country's regular army, appointing hardened veterans of the war with Iraq, and past internal crackdowns to key posts, expanding domestic counterintelligence operations, and ramping up production of missiles and drones. The leadership quickly seized the initiative, attacking ships to tighten Iran's grip on Hormuz, and expanded the battlefield to the Red Sea, which Saudi Arabia has used to get around Iran's chokehold of the Persian Gulf. So they did exactly what I expected them to do. Exactly what anybody who knows anything about the Middle East would expect them to do. And the Trump administration did nothing. Suddenly, like a few weeks ago, they discovered, we're short on missiles. We're short on Patriots. I mean, you'd think they'd know that over the last 6 months. And now, frantically, the Pentagon is going to defense manufacturers and signing big contracts of billions of dollars to quickly ramp up production. Where have they been since the beginning of this war? Why the urgency? Because no strategy, no planning, no thinking. No thinking. I mean, while Iran was figuring out how to better protect itself next round, the United States has been doing nothing. Its ships laying off the coast of Oman, low on supplies. The base of the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain took significant damage during the war and is not really being rebuilt. So logistics of getting actual supplies to the ships, including aircraft carriers, is really problematic. Now, in order to relieve the aircraft carrier that is there, the U.S. is pulling the only aircraft carrier in the entire Pacific Eastern Pacific, from the Eastern Pacific to the Middle East, and leaving the Pacific with no aircraft carrier because they're so desperate, because they haven't planned, because there's no strategy, because they don't know what the frigging they're doing. I mean, the Trump administration is so incompetent when it comes to the Middle East. It is scary that these people still have 2 more years in office. People say, oh, this is better with Kamala. Is it? Really? In what way? I mean, today marks the formal end of the US-Iran MOU, 60 days, remember? And, this is the day the Wall Street Journal, reports that Tehran used the 2-month pause not to de-escalate, but to rearm. And this is not like people didn't warn about this. Even people that I don't always agree with, like, I don't know, Mike Pompeo, Nikki Haley, General Jack Keane, and others, me. Everybody, they all understood that the regime had no intention of pausing, had no intention for peace, had no intention to negotiate. It was just an opportunity to reload. And Trump missed this because he has no strategy, no thinking, no knowledge. And he surrounded himself by people who just cheer him on, who don't challenge him, who don't ask questions, who just cheer him on. Whatever he wants, they can do. No, they can't. I mean, America is significantly weaker today in the Middle East than it was before this war. The war was a disaster. Now let's take Israel. We had a deal around Gaza, which Trump revealed last year. And everybody signed off, Hamas and, dozens of Islamic countries signed off on this, and so did Israel. And that deal had to do with, Israel staying in parts of Gaza and Hamas being, all the weapons being taken, disarming of Hamas. And of course, Hamas refused to disarm. And there was going to be an international force that came into the Gaza, and then after they disarmed, there would be an interim government set up of technocrats, and then there was going to be a rebuilding. Jared Kushner was going to organize all these billions and billions of dollars to rebuild Gaza and to turn it into a resort, right? And none of that is happening. So then late last week, Trump comes out with a new plan. And this plan requires Israel to leave Gaza, and then Hamas will disarm, and then there'll be the international peace force, and then there'll be all the rest happens, the development and all this stuff. And Israel basically came out and said, no, we're not going to leave. There's an agreement. That agreement postulates Hamas disarming first. We are not leaving Gaza until Hamas disarms of not just heavy weapons, light weapons as well. And in the meantime, we will continue to take out Hamas leaders. We will continue to take out Hamas operatives threatening our forces. Well, today, Jared Kushner, after Netanyahu said, no, we're not doing that, Jared Kushner flies out and he meets with Hamas. Not with the negotiators with Hamas. America has always negotiated through other people and not met directly with Hamas leadership. No, he met directly with Hamas leadership. The president's son-in-law, the diplomat, the genius, is, met with the Hamas leadership today, to try to figure out what the deal is going to be. That a 90-minute meeting, which sources describe as, quote, very productive, with the idea that Hamas would take practical steps to fulfill its commitments. Now, why would Hamas? What does Hamas have to gain? What is it afraid of? That America will wipe them out? I mean, how many times has Trump threatened to wipe out Hamas and Iran? And now, by the way, today he threatened to wipe out Oman if they interfered with America's attempts to cut a deal with Iran or something like that, right? So he's threatening to wipe out countries. He never does it. His threats are meaningless. The whole idea is the border peace of pushing Hamas and Israel to move to the next phase of the U.S. 20-point peace plan from last year. Hamas leaders asked Kushner to tell Trump they remain committed to disarming, the sources said. We thank them for the commitment, but we want to see real efforts and not just words, the source added. It was important for Kushner to lock them into this commitment in person. They think Kushner is a little boy. You think they take Jared Kushner seriously? Kushner also thanked Hamas leaders. You're talking about Hamas leaders. You're talking about monstrous terrorists. You're talking about people with the blood of babies and children. And thousands of people, Palestinians and Israelis, on their hands. And you're sitting down and negotiating with them, and you're thanking them for their cooperation and efforts to recover, I don't know, bodies of all deceased Israeli hostages. That's what redeems Hamas from their history of, what is it now, 30 years of bloodshed. They're being redeemed because they helped find a few bodies. Anyway, the Hamas political leader Khalil al-Hayya attended alongside the Egyptian intelligence chief and the Qatari diplomats and Turkish officials, all good friends of Israel, right? These are the people who should be negotiating on behalf of a deal. I mean, Israel needs to be very clear to tell them to go to hell. Supposedly, Kushner stressed to Hamas leaders that the bar is high because the Israeli side doesn't trust them to actually disarm. I'm shocked. Kushner told them there's no room for negotiations on disarmament, but if they show real steps, the U.S. will do its best to make sure Israel takes steps of its own. The board also wanted to conduct corresponding steps in Gaza if Hamas starts disarming and to accelerate humanitarian relief to the enclave. Right. So we will see. We will see what happens. Kushner then flew from his meeting with Hamas to meet with Netanyahu. He met with Netanyahu. Supposedly, it was a long meeting. It's hard to tell what came of that meeting. It ended just before the show, so I haven't gotten full reports on kind of what supposedly happened in that meeting, but it was a long meeting. Supposedly it went well. They always say the meetings went well. But anyway, during all this, while Jared Kushner is meeting with Netanyahu, Trump comes out with a statement, right? Trump comes out with a statement saying that Israel has to stop striking Gaza. Israel has to stop taking out terrorists in Gaza. So Trump's emphasis is still Israel's too aggressive. So, Trump making a lot of statements today. So the Middle East is a mess, Luckily, the Gulf states are finding ways to get around the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, and they're delivering oil to the marketplace. This is why prices are kept in check, because the Gulf states are being very creative in finding ways around the Iranian blockade, and I hope that continues. Okay, that's the Middle East. But then this morning, was it this morning? No, late last night, Trump put out the following tweet. I mean, I'm laughing, but this is like so damn sad. It's hard to fully articulate, right? This is Trump's tweet. This is not Middle East anymore. but this is generally foreign policy. Based on my very good relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, or as he's better known, the ruthless, brutal, murderous dictator of North Korea. That's me. I'm not happy with the fact that the United States has long ago agreed to participate in joint military exercises with South Korea. These exercises are not only costly, with much of these costs paid for by the United States of America, as usual, but send a signal that is totally inappropriate and hostile to a country that, as long as Donald J. Trump has been president, has been unthreatening and respectful. Therefore, and based on the fact that it is too late to cancel, I've instructed Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to substantially reduce the joint military exercises. While somewhat unrelated, I recently asked the president of South Korea if they would like to join us in the denuclearization of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they said no thanks. So he's linking the two. Right? So Trump has a very good relationship with one of the most brutal dictators in the world today. I mean, he likes dictators. He's always liked dictators. Indeed, I think, and I've said this many times, that the way Trump behaved towards Kim Jong-un, the brutal dictator of North Korea, in his first term, disqualified him from being president again. Indeed, might have been reason for impeachment. The fawning over the love relationship he had with this monster is so disgusting, beneath contempt. Beneath contempt. So now Trump is groveling in front of South Korea, North Korea, and in a sense, holding it at arm's length. These South Koreans, who are our allies, Same phenomena in Europe. Grovel before Putin, arm's length Europe. Invite, Xi to Washington, go to Beijing, even as declaring China as a big problem, but have this cozy relationship with a dictator of China. I mean, this is America's last foreign policy, if ever there was one. America's last foreign policy, if ever there was one. It's just despicable. This man is a despicable human being and an incompetent. I mean, one of the main roles of president is foreign policy. And I cannot think of a president who is worse on foreign policy than Trump. This is Andrew Fox. Again, quote, he put the quote about Kim Jong-un, and he wrote above it, if Trump were a foreign plant with a mission to make the U.S. poorer, weaker, and more isolated, and do everything in his power to guarantee the next century of Chinese ascendancy, whilst maintaining just enough plausible cover, what would he be doing differently? Good question. I don't think he's a plant. I just think he's incompetent, and I think he admires dictators. And then, again, from Trump's social media, again, his complete incompetence when it comes to the Middle East. This is from yesterday. Very happy to see Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan have recently and finally signed the Mecca Joint Defense Agreement. It shows how the Middle East is coming together and how countries will finally be able to defend themselves in a more meaningful way. Congratulations to the great leadership of the three nations mentioned. This is a big, bold, and important first step. Wow. Donald Trump embracing, handing over leadership in the Middle East to Islamist Turkey, nuclear Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. This is the direction American foreign policy is heading. And none of these countries have even Saudi Arabia has no relations with Israel. Turkey has had diplomatic relations with Israel, but is hostile to Israel, actively hostile to Israel. Pakistan, actively hostile to Israel. But this is an important move. This is great. A joint defense agreement. I wonder who this joint defense agreement is really about once Iranian regime collapsed. Who is this joint defense agreement really about, if not Israel? Supposedly America's ally in the Middle East. Again, can't think more than 24 hours ahead. No capacity to strategize. This is an unmitigated disaster. This is a Sunni alliance of Islamist regimes with a nuclear bomb in the hands of Pakistan. This is not a positive for anybody in the world. It's potentially a disaster, potentially lead to Saudi Arabia getting a nuke. And of course, Turkey is becoming more Islamist as time goes on. So yes, this is President Trump. This is who you have running American foreign policy, and it's an unmitigated disaster. All right, let's do a few other news stories and even get to some human achievement stories for the day. We have time to even cover that. Let's see. We want to do something on justice. So the new Attorney General is being sworn in, and he was asked by Fox News about whether he will maintain the independence of the Justice Department. Traditionally, the Justice Department is independent. It is not just beholden to the president. It is supposed to be, independent of the president and willing to challenge the president, and has in its past. Even Donald Trump, famously, William Barr, when he was Attorney General, told Donald Trump that the 2020 election was not stolen, and he would not prosecute anybody for stealing something that wasn't stolen, something like that. Anyway, this Attorney General was asked about the idea of an independent Justice Department. And Todd Blanche rejected that idea. Will I take the President of the United States view of something into consideration? Yes, of course. And I hope every Attorney General in history would not answer that question differently. That's evading the question. That's evading the question. In the post-Watergate era, the Justice Department has basically been shielded from the White House's interference. But Blanche has often defended the president's right to weigh in on the department. In April, he told reporters the president had a right and a duty to offer opinions on criminal prosecutions. The question is, what does he do with those opinions? Remember that Blanche is a former criminal defense attorney for Trump. He was Trump's criminal defense attorney. That's all I really have to say. Now, he did say that the proposed anti-weaponization fund is going to be retired. That is not going to happen. I guess that's good. That public pressure was too much on that one. All right, let's talk about water quickly, and then water and then heat. Water. There's a real water crisis, an actual water crisis, not just one that's pretended, in the southwest of the United States. The Colorado River is at some of its lowest level ever. And the population in the southwest of the United States is only growing. Cities like Las Vegas and Phoenix and the Phoenix, but generally Arizona, more and more people are moving in. Population is increasing, water usage is increasing, and yet the water in the Colorado River is declining. It's declining to such an extent that some of the electricity generation from hydroelectric is put into question. And there's a Colorado River Compact of 1922, which designed to divide the water between the different states. But the reality is that because there's a lack of water right now, there is real disagreement about how to divide it. And the federal government is now going to intervene and try to manage this process and try to figure out how to divide the water of the Colorado River. And the reason for the decline in water is not enough snow falling. I mean, weather changes, climate changes. Climate does change. There is such a thing as climate change. Climate change is real. And then the question is what to do about it. And there's a big story in the Wall Street Journal about this and about the government's attempt. They document the decline in water, available water, and the consumption of water. I mean, there's plenty of water available in what's called the upper basin in the north, but there's just not enough water in the lower basin given consumption and given projections into the future. And there is a lot of competition for this water. There was an interesting op-ed in the Washington Post today about this that argued that the solution is to incentivize people to produce more water. What a concept. To produce more water. And there's, of course, a way to do this. You can create new water supplies. You can do this through desalination. You can do this by advanced, recycling. You can do it by groundwater recovery, by agricultural conservation. There are a lot of different ways in which you can actually add water to whatever nature is providing. I mean, the whole thing about human beings is we don't just rely on what nature provides. And indeed, the whole Colorado River project, which is a project of artificial lakes and dams and canals and water pipes and all of that, is man reshaping nature. But then we stopped. And now that there's less snow and there's less rain and there's less water, we just shrug. And what the article is arguing is, no, we should do well, this is me arguing, not really the article. We should do what human beings always do or should do, and that is adjust, innovate, and figure out how to create water where no water exists today. Now, supposedly, the government is moving towards a system where this will be incentivized, but they're doing it all wrong, of course. Here's from the article. In June, major water agencies in the lower basin states of Arizona, Nevada, and California, and the United States Bureau of Reclamation and Interior Department signed a memorandum of understanding to explore an interstate exchange network that could promote new water creation strategies. These include desalination and advanced recycled water, which could become a regular part of the lower basin's water management toolkit. Done correctly, the op-ed continues, this would not alter the allocation established by the 1922 Compact. Nobody wants to renegotiate that. Rather, it should create a framework that preserves water in the river by allowing states to supply their water needs through other methods. Most of all, the memorandum matters because it opens the door to building a marketplace. For decades, interstate exchanges have relied primarily on accounting mechanisms such as intentionally created supplies, surplus, ICS allows approved water agencies to store conserved water in Lake Mead for future use, and it's an important tool for conservation. But it doesn't encourage water supply creation. The open interstate exchange marketplace established by the memorandum is something different. The memorandum only explores this, it doesn't actually do it. For example, it would allow localities to supply their water through other means, such as ocean desalination, to voluntarily exchange their unused river water with other states for a price. No state's legal allocation would change, and no new water rights would be created. The marketplace would simply reward those who invest in creating water while reducing demand on the rivers. Now, I think this is a step in the right direction. This might solve the problem in the short run, but why not go all in? Why not take this away from state and local water authorities and privatize the whole system, including privatizing the actual water in the river? Why not figure out a way to actually privatize the water in the Colorado River and then scrap the pact and let the pricing mechanism work? Let prices determine how water is used. Now, there has to be some way to stop the northern states from using all the water so that no water flows south. But again, pricing could probably do that. Southern consumers in the south would pay more for the water than in the north. The north would have an incentive to sell it to the south. Anyway, I'm not sure I have the answer on how you exactly privatize the water in the rivers. But this is what economists should really think about. How do you create a marketplace? Not of government agencies, which is what the Washington Post is complimenting the government for doing, which is, again, an improvement over the existing system. But privatize it completely. Make water prices that consumers and agriculture pay reflect the true cost of water, which will reduce, for example, the amount of almond farmers in California and increase the use of water by citizens. I mean, there's a real opportunity here. Once we are creating a marketplace, let's really create a marketplace. The solution for water is privatization. And again, it's not easy to privatize water. You have to really think about how to do it, particularly water in rivers and lakes, but it's doable. Now, of course, desalination is the solution, and California should have desalination plants all along its coast. And it's the crazy environmentalists who are preventing this from actually happening. Desalination basically provides you with an endless quantity of fresh water. It requires electricity, so you need power plants, more power plants to go with that. You need increased power production. So yeah, we need more power plants, but the solution to all the water problems is desalination. And if you privatize water, maybe it'll turn out that actually taking water from the Colorado River is more expensive, given the shortage, than actually desalinating water. This is the beauty of a pricing system. You actually price based on the actual circumstances. The constraint in desalination right now is not energy. The constraint in desalination is the environmentalists. If you had nuclear energy all along the coast of California, you still wouldn't have desalination because they wouldn't allow it. The only county in California that is not restricted in water really is San Diego, because they actually have a desalination plant. Other counties try to build one, and they were stopped by the environmentalists. All right, here's a story about Europe. I'm in Europe right now, but this is a story about Northern Europe. This is from the New York Times, of all places. Here's how it starts. Seniors died in stifling apartments. Emergency calls were left on hold. Doctors treated an onslaught of people sick from heat, sometimes in wards without air conditioning. These are scenes that played out in Belgium, one of the world's wealthiest nations, on a recent summer weekend. they're also a warning to Europe. Europe is the fastest warming continent. I don't know if that's true, but okay. Yet large parts remain ill-prepared. As heat waves scorch its nations this summer, they're killing thousands in countries with strong health systems. In just 1 week in late June, there were around 16,000 excess deaths or more. People who died than usual in Europe, Belgium, France, and Germany were the worst affected. I mean, this is just stunning. I continue. Belgium, known for cold and damp, not searing heat, had the highest excess deaths in Europe, making it a case study into what went wrong. In Wallonia, a region that makes up the country's south, the death rate was 77% higher than what would be expected between mid-June and early July. Remember the excess death statistics from COVID? Some hospitals were overrun, with Guernseys and patients lining the hallways and medical staff working without breaks in unrelenting heat. Heat! It's just heat. People live in Las Vegas and in Phoenix. And here I am in Barcelona with the air conditioning blaring. Heat. And Belgium can't deal with the heat. It's sad. Now, this part of Belgium is listed the poorest and the oldest, but it's absurd. And what's amazing about this is that the New York Times realizes this. It writes, Belgians do not want, quote, want to be Americans with indoor temperatures set at 65 degrees, this doctor said. But he saw a middle ground in which vulnerable people would have access. He says, quote, this is from the doctor in Belgium, the mentality on air conditioning has to change. Duh. Yeah, the mentality in air conditioning needs to change. Air conditioning, good. Air conditioning, good. It's hard for them, I know. Others disagree. Even some Belgian officials are wary of relying too much on climate control, God forbid, concerned that adding it could overwhelm the power grid and leave cities even hotter by pumping hot air into the streets. God, as if no other country has to face this issue. Oh, man. I mean, get more power. Natural gas, I hear, is nuclear. I hear is good for this. The French have a lot of nuclear. Quote, air conditioning can be appropriate in specific situations, particularly for vulnerable people or certain buildings, said a spokesman for Bologna's Housing and Energy Ministry. However, a long-term strategy is not based on widespread deployment. So the Europeans want to go down with the ship. They will refuse air conditioning to the end. They will have their senior citizens dying of heat, which is not a pleasant way to die, rather than install air conditioning and build a few power plants and learn to live. This is, again, the barrier of human beings taking control of their own environment, which dominates our culture. Human beings are supposed to change the environment to fit their needs, change the environment by cooling it. Air conditioning. Air conditioning is what will save us from climate change. If climate change is going to lead to heating. And Europeans are resisting it, and they're dying in droves by the thousands, 16,000 excess deaths, 16,000 preventable deaths. Just on principle, we do not want air conditioning. Now, I'm in Europe. I was in Lisbon. I'm now in Barcelona. We'll be in Florence, and doing Airbnbs. All the Airbnbs that I'm renting have AC, have air conditioning. It is a requirement but not everybody has AC. A lot of people live without. Just think of the added productivity quality of life, never mind saving lives, that would happen without it, with air conditioning more prevalent in Europe. All right, let's move to a few positive stories. This one is pretty amazing. All right. In an area on private land in an area right next to SpaceX base station in Texas. This is where the rockets are launched, right? But not funded by SpaceX or Elon Musk. A 50-foot sculpture is being built. The 50-foot sculpture is of Prometheus. It's a bronze statue, and it's about 45% of the height of the body of the Statue of Liberty. It is being built by an independent group of French sculptors as a classical monument. A French classical foundry called Atelier Missot is independently assembling this 50-foot, 15 meters, bronze statue of Prometheus, right? And this is right outside the entrance of Starbase. How appropriate. It is a private project by the Atelier, which is a Paris-based workshop focused on monumental classical statues. They've described it as their own gift, tribute, symbolizing technological progress, defiance of limits, and multi-planetary ambition, drawing on the myth of Prometheus stealing fire from humanity. Who knew that there were such people in France who admired technological progress, defiance of limits, and multi-planetary ambition? And not only were there such people in France, but that they were good sculptors and had a foundry, and they could build monuments to such a thing. I mean, this is the most inspiring story I have heard in a long, long time. Now, the sections were cast in Paris. They've been shipped to Texas, and crews are now actively assembling it on site. Photos and videos from the sculptors and eyewitnesses show scaffolding, the head, and partial structure near Starbase. Now, I hope it's good. I'm encouraged by the fact that these are classically trained sculptors. From the pictures I'm seeing, it's definitely, realistic. It's definitely figurative, realistic. How good it is, I guess we won't know until it's finished and the patina's finished and everything's done, and we can actually see it. But it's 50 feet. It's 50 feet tall. How cool is that? Atelier Missot has posted it will stand 50 feet tall in a few days, holding a torch. They're calling it the Torch of the West. Cost estimates for this bronze version have been around $1 million. Larger titanium versions are part of their broader long-term vision. It is a bit taller than the Atlas statue at Rockefeller Center. I mean, this is, really pretty monumental. Now, the vision was announced in May 2025 that to build a colossal titanium Prometheus. He will be envisioned as roughly 20 to 30 meters, about 65 to 100 feet, so double the size of this one, as a monumental gift or tribute near the site launch. It would be ultimately about the size of the Statue of Liberty. Titanium was chosen for its strength to weight ratio, corrosion resistance, modernity, evoking aerospace in the jet age, and durability against both weather and potential, people who try to remember the Prometheus, the fire bringer, stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, symbolizing rebellion against limits, technological progress. I mean, this is The Foundry, by the way, has framed it as part of a broader project to revive Greco-Roman monumental sculpture across the West, countering what they see as civilizational void in heroic public art. So 2 thumbs up to this Foundry and what they are trying to achieve and what they want to do. This is super cool and I think super important. And completely privately funded, it reminds me of the fact that the Statue of Liberty was privately funded, was a gift from France, and was assembled in New York with private funding, no government funding, and was assembled very, very quickly. As compared to, example, the Washington Monument that took decades to build because government. So anyway, this is exciting. You can check out photos and videos online. You know, a revival of figurative sculpture would be amazing. A revival of classical heroism would be amazing. By the way, guess who's pissed off? And by the way, I think putting it at the entrance of Starbase, celebrating SpaceX is fantastic. It's just magnificent. It's just so cool and awesome. Guess who's pissed off? The religious right is pissed off. This is Blaze Media. Blaze Media. You know, this is I think what's his name? I don't know about Elizabeth Warren and JD Vance upset. JD Vance, I'm sure, is upset. This is Blaze, right? Blaze Media, this is the headline. A huge pagan statue just went up in Texas. Is this the Western civilization we should be cheering? This is Glenn Beck. Now, I don't have access to the entire article. I wish I did because it's a whopper. But you know, so they write, a 50-foot bronze statue of pagan god Prometheus is rising out of the Texas dirt near SpaceX's Starbase, holding a torch over the launch site that is supposed to carry mankind towards the stars. The symbolism is not exactly subtle. Prometheus, the Greek titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, has long represented man's acquisition of knowledge and technological power. The French classical foundry Atelier Missot, which is behind the project, says the complete sculpture will stand at Starbase holding high the torch of the West. The statue is apparently not a SpaceX commission or some monument Elon Musk ordered for himself. Atelier Missot reportedly financed the project itself and is assembling it on private land near Starbase as a tribute to technological progress. It is tempting to love the whole thing. After decades of public art that seems deliberately designed to be ugly, alienating, or incomprehensible, here are artists building an enormous muscular figure from classical mythology. Atelier Missot is openly hostile to the abandonment of monumental Western art, and its founders have sculpted Hercules, Joan of Arc, and Napoleon. I'm not sure about Napoleon, all talking without embarrassment about beauty, heroism, civilization, and great men. Yeah. Its website declares that, quote, gigantic titanium statues will guide us to a beautiful future, while the atelier describes itself as a classical foundry, quote, on its way to building a new Rome. Not sure what we want is Rome, but anyway. Good. I would rather live in a civilization that build rockets and enormous bronze statues than one that tears its statues down and lectures its children about the shamefulness of their inheritance. Atelier Missot's revolt against the liberty ugly public art is refreshing, and SpaceX is doing things that would have sounded like science fiction not long ago. And this is, unfortunately, it's going to get cut off after this next sentence. And I'm not going to pay the Blaze to read the rest of it. But if Prometheus is going to hold the torch of the West, we ought to ask whether he is carrying the right torch. He represents an important strand of Western civilization, perhaps one of the dominant strands of modern West, but he does not represent the whole thing. So they wanted to hold a torch and a cross. pretty lame, pretty lame. But yes, supposedly there are discussion groups in Texas among the evangelicals about whether they like this. They don't. They think it's sacrilegious. They think it celebrates Roman Greece, when it should be celebrating Christ. And they're very, very, very upset. So religious right doesn't like it. Isn't that a surprise? All right. Yeah, if somebody has access to the entire article, I would love to be able to read the entire thing. It would be really cool. So if somebody is a subscriber to the Ways and you can, I don't know if it's violating the copyright or something, if you can get me a copy of that article, I would really appreciate it. It would be cool. And I promise to read it and to use it maybe in my book about Christianity. All right. A couple of quick stories. SpaceX, talk about SpaceX, has just set a record. They launched 2 Falcon 9 rockets in just 38 minutes apart from 2 different sites across the country on 2 different coasts. So, it's pretty amazing. It's launching far more frequent than any other outfit. It operates the largest satellite constellation ever assembled. SpaceX is killing it, and they deserve the Prometheus sculpture out there. It's pretty amazing. All right, and one last final story. AI is just being shown to be really good at predicting the intensity and the path of cyclones, of hurricanes. Google's DeepMind WeatherNext cyclones produced 15-day assembled forecasts. And comparing these, they tested it on back data from the 2023 to 2025 storm seasons. They averaged at least 24 hours more useful lead time for track intensity and wind extent than leading operational models do today. So AI improving our ability to forecast dramatic weather, that's a win for everybody. And another example of the potential amazing benefits that we could all get from AI. All right, let's turn to our super chats. And you guys have done really well. We're going to go into the third hour. Well, we're reaching the third hour in a minute. And you guys are well on the way to achieving the goal of the third hour. It'd be great if we actually attained it. We're only $110 short of the third hour goal of $750. So that'd be great if we could make it. Let me remind you of a few things. Austin conference that the Ironman Institute is hosting. If you're under 30 or 35 or under, you can still apply for a scholarship. I think for a few more days, maybe until tomorrow. Somebody's going to remember the 18th. Check out, unfortunately, it's not on my site. So check out, just put in Google, Austin Ironman Institute Conference 2026, and the website will come up, and you can check out the scholarship applications. Defendersofcapitalism.com, defendersofcapitalism.com. I've told you I with them work with Leadership Program of the Rockies. I'm going to try to get Michael on the show this week. We'll see, to talk a little bit about Leadership Program of the Rockies. It's a great program. You can do leadershipprogram.org, leadershipprogram.org to find out more information. Registration is open until the end of the month. If you live in Colorado, or if you're willing to travel from Colorado to take part in this, one day a month, second Friday of every month, from October through June, and amazing content, really, really good content. Like as a follower of this show, some of the content you won't like, but you will learn a lot. And it'll be great to have you there to challenge people on the content you don't like. So, it's a mixture of kind of standard Republican, conservative talking points and objectivism, and a mixture of it. So, but the more objectives we get into the program, the more that point of view will come through. So please consider applying leadership. Oh, and it costs money, and they don't accept everybody who applies. So it's competitive. Leadershipprogram.org. Alex Epstein, the leading authority on data centers, and now on data centers, but before on energy and electricity and the grid and environmental regulation. You got to follow Alex. Alex is one of the great resources in the world out there. He is. You can find him at alexepstein.substack.com, alexepstein.substack.com, and finally, Hendershot Wealth. hendershotwealth.com/YBS. If you're facing an event where you're going to accrue massive capital gains taxes, as some of you might hold, SpaceX stocks, or in the future, Anthropic stock or OpenAI stock, you should consider contacting Hendershot Wealth for some of their strategies around deferring or really eliminating to some extent, or certainly deferring your capital gains taxes into the indefinite future, put it that way. All right, finally, this show is funded through contributions by you. Couldn't do it without you. You are funding my time, the effort I put into this, my time in presenting, but also my time doing all the research. It takes a long time to put together a new show like this. I spend most of the day doing it. Even though I have AI now helping me, it's still, I still have to verify what AI says. You can't trust that thing. And it doesn't always find the best stories. But anyway, you guys fund this and make it possible. So thank you. We have goals for each one of these shows that those of you who are on live, make possible. So $250 for each hour that I present. And this time we're going to go for the 3 hours. So the goal is $750. So hopefully we can make it. We're $108 short. But we've got a whole hour to make it up. So shouldn't be a problem. And but you can become a monthly supporter, and that is great because then it's predictable, it's knowable. I know exactly what's coming, and that really lays the foundation for the Yaron Brook Show. So please consider becoming a monthly supporter on Patreon or on PayPal. And I'll just say that the monthly support is incredibly valuable, and those of you who can afford to do it, if you can do $100 or $250 or $500. That will be you trading with me, value for value. You listen to the show, you gain value from the show. The value I need from you is your monthly support. That is the value that that is really valuable to me. So think about becoming a subscriber on PayPal, on Patreon, patreon.com, and just put Yaron Brook Show on. I know a lot of you listen to the show but don't subscribe, don't participate in the super chat, or don't do the Patreon thing. You really should. Again, you're gaining a value. Pay for it. All right, let's turn to our super chatters. We got a number of 50. Let's see if we've got any hundreds. No, a bunch of 50s. All right, so we'll go down to 50s. We'll start with the 50s and then go to the 20s, and then do the 10 and the 5s. All right, Hopper Campbell, part 1. Is the reason a serial killer who murdered dozens is viewed as a monster, while the communist dictator who slaughtered millions is viewed as having meant well, but didn't work out in practice? And he continues into part 2. Because the serial killer is viewed as having a selfish interest in doing what he did it for his own selfish gratification, while the communist authoritarian was by an altruistic greater good. Yes, absolutely. So the communist or the fascist or whoever it is, they were doing it for political reasons. They were doing it to make their country better. They were doing it for, sacrifices needed to achieve goals. They were doing it for. It might have been a it might have been a bad goal in the end, right? So the egalitarianism of the Soviet Union was not really achievable. So sad that 40 million people had died for it, or Mao's China couldn't really achieve the egalitarians they sought. But the goal was a good goal. You have to respect the goal. Whereas a serial killer has no goal other than his own gratification, which is not really gratifying, but it's ugly and disgusting. But it's perceived by the culture as being selfish. And in a sense, the essence of selfishness. Because in the end, they think that all selfish behavior is destructive behavior. It's the behavior equivalent to the serial killer. So yeah, I think it's absolutely the case. It's political aims. Napoleon is considered noble because he wanted to bring, I don't know, something to Europe, and to hell with all the soldiers who died in his wars of expansion. He's a hero because he had a bigger than himself and bigger than the people around him goal. It's something greater than yourself. If you kill a lot of people in the name of God, that's okay. If you kill them in your name, that's not okay. Now, no killing is okay. They should be treated the same. These are monsters. All right, let's see. Michael, leftists have said these $15 minimum wage laws have been in place in every major American city for a decade now, and they have not seen a collapse or massive rise in low-skilled unemployment. The GOP and free marketers were just fear-mongering. Yeah, I mean, they'll continue to say that. And look, the reality is that when they raised the minimum wage in these cities to $15, the wages the wages the workers were making at the time were not that lower than $15. That is, even though the minimum wage is 7.25 at the federal level, very, 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 very few companies pay anybody $7.25 an hour. They pay them more than that. So when they raised to 15, they weren't raising it from 7.25, they were raising for some higher amount. And that raise wasn't large enough to create massive problems that are easily observable. However, in places like Seattle, that have run these programs for a while now, where people have actually dug into the data and looked carefully, absolutely you see an effect. You see businesses moving outside of Seattle to avoid the minimum wage that they imposed. You see jobs moving out of Seattle. You see, because companies can't afford to pay them. So businesses are moving out, jobs are moving out. What else was there? Some of the findings. Companies that stay in Seattle employ fewer people. So the people who they don't employ, where are they? They're outside of Seattle, still making the wages that they were making before. So, of course, it causes real dislocations. The smaller the actual increases, the smaller dislocation. But even the smallest increase causes dislocation. The question is, can you measure them? How do you observe them? How do you find them? And are you willing to do the careful analysis to figure out what they really are? Because these economic studies are not easy to pull off. But the leftists are just plain absolutely wrong. And of course, what we don't have, is the parallel universe in which these minimum wage laws are never passed. And there are more jobs, and there are more companies, and there are more stuff going on. And there's greater prosperity. So they're just plain wrong, and they're deceiving, and they're not being truthful in telling you what actually is going on. Andrew, I'll never forget Vance saying on a podcast about Israel's military actions post October 7th that he doesn't believe Israel killing everybody is the right answer to every dispute. Yeah, he said that recently. Revealing of his morality and Swami willingness to evade and boldface lie. Yes. So he said something like, the solution can't be killing everybody, as if anybody in Israel, maybe with the exception of some crazy right-wing fanatics, is arguing to kill everybody, as if that is what Israel has been doing, and that's what Israel wants to do. It's just evasive and a way to justify the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic attitudes of the crazy right, which he is part of today, and he is an apologist for. And statements like that just reinforce that anti-Jew and anti-Israel attitude. Selfie subscriber, would it be valid comparison to suggest presidents being afforded legal protection accountability while in office is similar to businesses being afforded protection for market accountability because they're deemed too big to fail? I mean, not exactly. Again, because this is the difference between political power and economic power. Presidents should have some immunity, some protection while in office. They can't be thinking about, we're going to go to war. Oh, yeah, but all those servicemen are going to sue me. Their families will sue me if they get killed or they get injured. And, you know, there's no standard for suits like that. Now, if he does something criminal, then he should be liable. But it has to be criminal. There can't be negligence when it comes to, it can't be regular market-like lawsuits when it comes to the president because of the need to wield force and the nature of force, which is very different than the nature of business transaction is voluntary exchange. And as such, the parties, have to, there's a certain protection being wielded given that voluntary nature of it. You can't completely deceive me. And you can't be egregiously, negligent. Although I think, again, liability law is completely off. That somebody has to do the work to redo liability law in America. Liability law is ridiculous. Anyway, somebody has to really do the thinking about what about the presidency needs to be legally protected. Look, the way to legally protect, ultimately, from bad decision-making is the impeachment, which I wish they would use more often. It's not the legal system. It's not everybody's allowed to sue the president. That can't be the right answer. And for example, the marketplace is competition. There's no competition in government. I mean, all of these things need to be taken into account and considered when thinking about how you deal with presidential decision-making versus the marketplace decision-making and legal liability in that sense. The voluntary relationships, the fact that there's no competition, all of that plays a role. Selfie subscriber, does Trump intend to monetize, sell early access to his market impacting decisions, provide us context when considering the possibility that Trump's theft of classified information in Mar-a-Lago was a trial balloon for selling information? Maybe. I don't think so. I don't think he thought that far ahead. I think, I think he's responsive. He's not a planner. He's not a strategist. So I don't think he does trial balloons. I think what he noticed is, oh, I post stuff on social and the market responds. I wonder if I can make money doing that. That's how I think it happens. I don't think it's, I think the stealing of classified information from the Mar-a-Lago was much more about prestige. He wanted to be able to show his guests how important he was, how big shot he was. Ooh, look at the documents I have. Much more than he was going to sell this stuff. I don't think that's what happened. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that that's what happened. And I don't think he learned from that. I think he learned by posting and seeing the market response, particularly around tariffs and around the war, and saying, or one of his people saying, hey, is there a way we can make money off of this? Let's sell this information. So it's reactive in that sense. All right, let me thank our sticker people. We're $28 short of our goal. Only 28. We could make this up with some small stickers. Friend Harper, thank you for the sticker. Whoops, that skipped ahead in a way I didn't want to. So we had Friend Harper. Who else do we have? We don't have a lot of stickers today. We have a lot of questions, not a lot of stickers. Oh, selfish subscriber, $50 sticker in addition to the question, in addition to two $50 questions. Thank you. That's very generous. Really appreciate it. Alan, thank you for the sticker. Mary Aline, thank you for the sticker. Roland and Stephen Harper and Jack and Gail, thank you guys. And I think I got all of you. And again, $28. We can do a bunch of $2 stickers, 14 people, $2 stickers. We can make it up. We can make that goal. All right, let's move to the $20 questions. Michael, was Hitler in the Christian conservative tradition or was he an Eastern mystic? No, there's no reason to associate him with Eastern mysticism. I think Hitler comes from a pre-Enlightenment European tradition of militancy, of violent conquest that both goes back to old German, German tribes, and to Christianity. But the German tribes were Christian. Do you know the German tribes that sacked Rome were Christian? And then German tribes conquered the Iberian Peninsula, and then German tribes crossed the Straits of Gibraltar and actually conquered North Africa, and they were all Christians. So conquest and Christianity go hand in hand. They're not separate. Of course, anti-Semitism and Christianity go hand in hand. He was much more, I think, influenced by Christianity than he was by Eastern mysticism. Of course, a Christianity of conquest, which is not kind of modern Christianity, a pre-Enlightenment Christianity, All right. One second. All right. Liam says, can you do a show on where objectivism is having an influence in the culture today? Like Blake Scholes and Boom, where you see it popping up in different parts of the culture at large and on individual CEOs. I mean, I don't know that I know much of that. I mean, I can talk about it a little bit. I don't know if a whole show is justified, but we can definitely do something about that. It's popped up in the past more than it is right now, because right now other things are dominating kind of the culture, whether it's religion and post-liberalism, and on the right, woke, MAGA, and then woke on the left, or the crazy left. So I don't know. We've got Blake Scholes. As I've told you, almost every CEO in the Valley has read Atlas Shrugged and inspired by CEOs from 3 generations ago all the way to CEOs today. But I don't know if that's enough. I've said that so many times in the past. I'm thinking of new things that I could say, and I don't know that many new things that I haven't already said in the past. But let me think about it and see if there's enough content there to cover it. Thank you, Liam. Clark, part 1. Donald Trump swept into office in 2024 with an air of invincibility that he did not earn and knew would not last. But so long as it did, he would use it to intimidate his opponents and wreak havoc in the federal government, encouraging a culture of cruelty that continues to persist despite its fading appearance of invincibility. Undermined by his own incompetence, including his willingness to betray even the most loyal MAGA supporters. Unfortunately, that culture of cruelty may turn out to be the most persistent attribute of his legacy. I think that's right. Plus, American weakness and incompetence, I think, are going to add up to his legacy. But yes, I think that's right. He's running out of steam to some extent. But look, I'll give you for example, ICE. I keep reading stories about ICE, and I'll share some of them in a future show. Things are really, really bad with ICE. It's doing horrible things. It's got a quota now of 2,000 people a day. And to meet that quota, it is going after people who are arguably legally here, waiting for their green card to arrive, married to US citizens, married to US military personnel, or people who are in the process of legalizing their status but haven't quite gotten it. And they're being detained, they're being sent to the far reaches of the world, to horrible countries. They're being put in maximum security prisons. The brutality of what ICE is doing is, I truly think, unimaginable, incomprehensible to most decent people. There's just no excuse for this stuff, and it's disappeared from the headlines. It's just now become background. It makes a story here and there in the press, but nobody gets excited about it. There was a period when it was in Minnesota because it was in people's faces, but they've learned how to do it without being in people's faces too much, and nobody's overly excited by it, and nobody's making it a big issue. All the left can do is say abolish ICE and open the borders, and that sounds kooky, so nobody takes it seriously. Instead of talking about reining it in or shrinking it or closing the border while doing away with ICE, so I don't know, something like that would be more acceptable to American people. It's just disappeared as a real agenda item. And the consequence of that is the cruelty is embedded in the institution. The institution is not budging. And yes, that will be the lasting legacy. And then everything I said about sucking up the dictators and incompetence and turning our back to allies, Israel, Europe, South Korea, Taiwan. It's just, right. And I'm not sure we can ever recover from that. I think that's part of the legacy. But yes, I think you're absolutely right, Clark. Right, not your average algorithm. A French professor described America as a nation of show-offs. Does a boastful culture represent a healthy pride and achievement, or kind of superficial, shallow narcissism? Well, I mean, it depends. You probably know people whose boastfulness is shallow narcissism, and you know others who it's a healthy pride. Now, it depends how it's done, partially. I think you can always identify the boastful, the narcissism by the way they boast. But I think American culture has both. And it's tilting more towards the narcissism and less towards the healthy pride, because pride is suspect. And there's less and less to be proud of. This country has become less and less of a culture of achievement and more of a culture of narcissism. So I think it's both. So the French professor is right about certain Americans. All right, some stickers. By the way, we made the goal. So thank you for all the people who made it possible for us to reach the second hour goal. If we go into the fourth hour, I might add on to the goal. John, thank you. Richard, thank you. These are stickers. Bonnie, thank you. That really helped us reach the goal. Arthur, Mao, Stalin, Hitler, Tojo all disappeared. The Enlightenment, with all its flaws and incompleteness, is so much stronger than these anti-human ideologies. Yes, It is, because it's much closer to truth. Truth has power. Truth is power. The question is, can we prevent those people coming back? Can we prevent new Mao, Stalins, Hitlers from coming back, from reemerging? That's the challenge of the next, few hundred years. And can we bolster the enlightenment? Can we prevent it from having a dark ages like Greece had and like the West had? And I think we can. I think we can save it, but that's a struggle we face. But you're absolutely right. Evil is impotent. Evil is impotent. And this is what we need to recognize. And this is why we should never sanction evil, should never give it a stage. We should never promote it. We should condemn it constantly, relentlessly, and shun it, cancel it. I'm all for canceling. We should cancel evil, evil of the left, evil of the right. Evil per se should be canceled. And that includes evil ideologies. There's no point really in debating communism. There's no point really in debating Nazism. They're so overwhelmingly, unequivocally, obviously evil. What's the point? If somebody doesn't see it, what are you going to show them? All right, Andrew has a 4-part question, so let's go through this. Promise I'm now done watching clips of Candace's show. Good. Curiosity satisfied. I know you don't like melodrama, but her war on Erica Koch is more like a Shakespearean drama. She accuses Erica of complicity, equivocating on if the murder itself or cover-up. She regularly calls Erica a psychopath whose marriage was a sham to get fortune and fame. Now a ghoulish grifter, murderer, profiteer. In a chilling clip, Candace assures that she wishes Erica no harm, as death is easy. She deserves a long life in agony for her sins. I have no opinion on Erica, but Candace's certainty and hate is not warranted by the facts cited. Such relentless attacks regularly segments on a top podcast. Erica's a recently widowed mother. If mainly conspiracy BS, it is outside violence, one of the cruelest acts of public mistreatment of a person I've ever observed. Yeah, look, I don't know Erica. I don't know Erica. And but what Candace is doing is completely arbitrary, presenting with assurance and certainty completely arbitrary claims that cannot be argued against because there's no there. There's nothing to argue. There's no facts. And any fact that you present is going to be poo-pooed away by some counter arbitrary assertion. Look, I knew Charlie Koch. I didn't know Erica. And Charlie, at least when he was younger, was like was a decent guy and intelligent. The idea that his wife is the scheming, crazy, homicidal is, in my view, ludicrous, and there's just zero evidence to suggest it's true. And if there is, then it needs to be presented. And there isn't. And the fact that people are listening to this, the fact that that Candace has one of the biggest podcasts in the country, that she is everywhere. And that people not only are listening to it, but then relating to it. She just debated somebody on this. She debated a guy on who killed Charlie Koch, something Wilson, a professional debater, he calls himself, right? He's an actor. the brother of what's his name, Wilson, the actor. And the fact that people give her a stage, even pretend that there's even a shred of legitimacy. I mean, all of that is evil. This is real barbarism. I agree with you completely. One of the cruelest acts of public mistreatment ever. She is crazy. I mean, she really is crazy. And she's evil. At this point, she's damn evil. Candace Owen is an evil person. The fact that she trades in lies on a scale that, God, you just don't see out of outside of a kind of authoritarian regimes. But she is a real monster and should be avoided. She shouldn't be listened to. She shouldn't be promoted. She should be canceled by everybody. Everybody should cancel her. The idea that Ben Shapiro would even consider debating her is, I think, ludicrous. The idea that Ben Shapiro would, yeah, I mean, she needs to be canceled by everybody. She is unworthy of being associated with in any context. In any context. Ryan, hey Ryan, 50 Canadian dollars. Coming in late here. When intellectuals promote capitalism in concrete terms without abstracting to the moral defense of capitalism, I think it creates an opening for capitalism to be torn down by the common good. Teach morality, speak up, thanks. Yeah, you've got to integrate it. You've got to make the economic arguments, because a lot of the arguments the other side makes are economic, but you've got to integrate it with a moral tone and moral facts and morality and a defense of self-interest, a defense of a person's right to his own life, making his own decisions for himself. But you can't only do that. You have to integrate the two. And very, 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 very few people do that. Outside of objectivism, almost nobody. All right. Stephen says, here's to Prometheus, an Ayn Rand's 1938 novelette anthem. Thank you, Stephen. Yes. That was an inspiring story about Prometheus, right? I mean, I'm looking forward to driving out there and seeing the statue. It should be really cool. Paul, if the Dems win the House, will they impeach Trump? And what will happen to the Israel policy? Yes, they'll impeach Trump. There'll be a majority in the House against Israel, probably, because not all Democrats will be anti-Israel, but enough Republicans will be anti-Israel to combine. But because Trump is there, they can't really do anything on the Israel front. And it's not clear that they win the Senate. And even if they win the Senate, they won't have enough anti-Israel voices, because people like Fetterman are pro-Israel, and more Republican senators are pro-Israel than House members. So they just don't have the votes to do anything significant vis-a-vis Israel. And now, if they win the presidency, the House and the Senate in 2028, watch out. This is the consequence of having Trump. This is the consequence of voting for Trump last time. Michael, the best stories of your life begin with a decision that made absolutely no sense to anyone else. Maybe. I'm not sure that's true. But there is a good story there. I don't know about the best stories. Liam, strength doesn't come from what you can do. It comes from overcoming what you thought you couldn't. Yes. I mean, you need to stretch yourself. Always stretch yourself. Always push yourself. So doing the things that you didn't think you could do. James, does the idea of having children for the sake of your legacy or bloodline reek of second-handedness? Yes. And of collectivism and of, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what does the legacy mean? What does bloodline mean? I mean, what do they carry your blood? I mean, it's deterministic collectivism, family type collectivism. Yes, you should only have children because you enjoy the process of raising children and interacting with children and interacting with them as adults. That's the only reason they have them. James says, Nazism is forming in America under different names. Yeah, I still think actual Nazism, those set of ideas, is pretty rare and pretty small still. Time, UK lost half its millionaires in the last decade. Yes, I was going to do a show on that. I'll cover it in one of my shows. They're losing millionaires like unbelievable. Ryan, you would think fighting Islamism would be an indestructible thread of common interest between US and Israel. Have we all forgotten September 11th? Disgusting. Yes, we don't care about September. We didn't understand September 11th when it happened. We couldn't identify the enemy then. We didn't fight it properly then. Why would we know anything more about what caused September 11th and how to fight it and who our real allies are today than we did in 9/11? We didn't know then. We still don't know. We still haven't learned any of the lessons. Not your average algorithm. Is AI progressing faster than we could have ever expected in our late stage mixed economy? I don't know, right? I didn't know enough about AI to have expectations about it. I mean, I don't think the mixed economy is yet having too much of an influence. It's unregulated. It's in technology, which is an area that's still unregulated, relatively speaking. So I don't think it's that unexpected. Not your average algorithm. If you've accumulated a lot of wealth, why does it make more sense to put your money in the stock market rather than tax-free muni bonds? Well, because you get a higher return in the stock market, even after taxes. Your after-tax return on stocks will be, over the long run, significantly higher than the after-tax return on muni bonds. The after-tax return on muni bonds will be low. And depends what you want. In the short run, maybe it makes sense, but in the long run, it doesn't, because in the long run, the stock market significantly outperforms, even on a tax-adjusted basis, the municipal bond market. Think of it this way. In the stock market, you're investing in production. In the bond market, you're investing in the state. What is going to outperform? Not your average algorithm. I mean, it's risk adjusted. Muni bonds is no risk. But in the long run, you get rewarded for risk. And that's why stocks make more sense. Not your average algorithm. If Trump had won instead of Biden in 2020, would you still have kept your hedge fund to this day? Would you have reached your FU money goal? Maybe. It's distinct possibility. I mean, we did okay coming out of COVID, but 22, 23 were bad, and who knows what would have happened if Trump, I mean, put it this way, I think it's a better than 50% chance that yes, that I would have made my FU goal, and the hedge fund would still be out there. But it didn't happen, so I don't worry about things that could have. Arthur, Mamdani has declared war on Amazon. Will Amazon leave New York City, or will it take longer and be more expensive to get your packages? I don't know. That'll be interesting. I hope so. I hope Amazon declares war on Mamdani and makes New Yorkers suffer the consequences of voting for Mamdani, which they're going to anyway. But Amazon could accelerate that. That would be cool. Arthur, the AI data centers today are outpacing the diabolical corruption of MAGA. This enlightenment project continues to prevail despite all the evil undermining it. Yeah, but it's being slowed down. There are lots of projects being halted, slowed down. It should be even faster. It should be even faster. But yes, technology is moving us forward in spite. Lincoln, 3-part question, it looks like. Interesting data point on academia's continued struggles. My college, the University of Arizona, is expecting to have just 5,800 freshmen versus 9,300 in 2024. And the University of Arizona is consistently ranked a top public university for STEM. things are probably much worse for non-Ivy League private schools and less rigorous public schools like the Cal State and A&M schools. And we've only just started to the kids born post '07 birth rate peak into college. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'll look into the numbers and I'll see if this is a bigger thing and a trend in terms of shrinking university attendance. Wouldn't be surprised in the post-woke era if we see that. Gene, here's to Prometheus. Thank you, Gene. Blaze, why does the US rank so poorly in median net worth? And is that an important economic metric? It ranks poorly in median net worth because the median is 50-50, right? And the United States has more, if you will, income inequality than places like Europe. So in Europe, the median is higher than in the United States, in some countries in Europe, but you can't advance much beyond the median. The range is shrunk, right? So statistically, you have a range that's much smaller, and the positive tail is significantly reduced. So Europe is mediocre, and the median is strong. In the United States, the median is weaker, but your upside is much, much higher, not just at the very end, not at the top of the tail, but all through. There are many, many more millionaires, there are many more people making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and many more people with wealth in the hundreds of thousands than Europeans are. But the median is there. It's also, I mean, my guess is because this is wealth, that it relates to real estate. Real estate in Europe is very expensive. People have the same home for generations. They have a real estate that counts towards that wealth. They might be poor in income. Look, none of this is important. What really matters, if you want to compare Europe and the United States, for example, what you really want to compare is basically disposable income. How much money do you have after you pay taxes, after you get whatever subsidies you get from the government, after you pay for healthcare? How much money do you have for the rest of stuff, for food and for fun and for vacations and for going to the movies and all this stuff? How much do you have left? And there's no comparison. Both median and average is much higher in the United States than in Europe. So what you really want to look at is disposable income. And you can cut that through different age groups, and the United States performs better in every age group. Every age group. So I wouldn't pay any attention to the median net wealth. And again, real estate plays a big role in that. But you don't eat real estate, you don't consume real estate. You could own a small little apartment in Paris, and it's worth a lot of money because it's been in your family forever, and have very little income to actually enjoy Paris. Whereas, in the United States, I think there's less of that. But I'd have to really dig into the numbers to see what exactly is going on. Let's see. Lincoln says, amazing to think with debt consuming trillions that could be invested in the state hating entrepreneurship, we still grow our economy this fast. Well, we're not growing it very fast. It's under 2%. So don't get too excited about economic growth. We're growing at a very low rate. It's under 2%. I think it's 1.6%, which is not good. We should be growing at 4-5%. And the debt, it's not about the debt, it's about government spending. Think about all the waste in spending and redistributing wealth rather than in investing that wealth. Lincoln also says, it's almost incomprehensible the tech and quality of life we get with real capitalism and US debt money instead be put towards AI, science, biotech. Yes, absolutely. Unimaginable how wealthy we would be. Andrew says, Ben Shapiro should heed the lesson. You lay down with dogs, you're going to get fleas. Absolutely. Absolutely. He made Candace. I mean, Charlie Cook and Ben Shapiro made Candace. Charlie Cook discovered Candace, made her senior person in Turning Point USA, and then Ben Shapiro gave her the job of her life. This amazing job, and then she stabbed him in the back. She became a monster. All right, guys. Thank you to all the super chatters. You were great today. Show tomorrow will probably be an hour later, probably at 3 p.m. East Coast time. And that'll be true of Tuesdays in the foreseeable future. What else do I want to tell you? Yeah. So tomorrow, 3 p.m. East Coast time, then hopefully back to 2 p.m. East Coast time. Tomorrow will be late for me. So I might be a little tired, but hopefully not. All right, guys. See you tomorrow. Have a great rest of the week. Bye, everybody.